Okay, now we're going to fill out this foldable to go in our notes, telling us about conditional statements and all the different parts. So go ahead and find this and we'll cut it out and then we'll start filling it out. Okay, now that we've got it all cut out, we're going to go through and fill this out. I've already filled mine out, so I'll just talk you through it as you fill out yours along with me. So our first flap here, it's conditional statement. So they can be written in if-then form. They can be true or false. So an example of a conditional statement is, if you work hard, then you will like geometry. So if you remember what a condition is, it's you'll do something if someone else will do something. There's a condition that goes to it. That's what this is. This is a conditional statement. A conditional statement has two parts. It has a hypothesis and a conclusion. This is how we would notate a conditional statement. P arrow Q. And then what this notation here says, it says if P, then Q. So P happens first and then Q will happen. So it's kind of hard to see on here, I know, but what I did is I went and I underlined all of the hypotheses in blue and all the conclusions in green. So I kind of color coded it that way. I know it's hard to see on the orange, but just to kind of keep things straight. Once we have our conditional statements, all of these others will follow after. So our next one is the converse. Converse is where we just switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. So here's my, if it is a rose, then it is a flower. The converse of this conditional statement would be, if it is a flower, then it's a rose. So I just switched to the first and last parts. How we notate this is Q arrow P, and what this says is if Q, then P. Then we come to negation. I know I skipped equivalent statements over here. We'll come to this one in just a minute. So negation, you can think negative or not, and that's what we're doing. We're negating the statement. So we put this little squiggly mark in front of it for the notation, and it just means not P. For example, it is raining. If we want to negate that sentence right there, we would just say it is not raining. Then we come over here to our inverse. Our inverse, it's just formed by negating our conditional statement. So we're just throwing some knots in there. So we negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. We have the little squiggly P, arrow squiggly Q. And what that means is if not P, then not Q. So for our conditional, if it is a rose, then it is a flower. To negate that and get us our inverse, we're just going to change it to if it is not a rose, then it is not a flower. And then we have our contrapositive up here. So our converse, we're switching. Our inverse, we're negating. Our contrapositive, we're doing both. We're switching and negating. So our conditional statement, if it is a rose, then it is a flower. Once we switch and negate it, our contrapositive would be if it is not a flower, then it is not a rose. And then here's our notation. If not Q, then not P. So let's talk about equivalent statements for just a minute. Equivalent statements are kind of cool. So what happens is when we have equivalent statements means they will have the same truth value. So they either both be true or both be false. And so whatever the conditional is, whether it's true or false, the contrapositive is going to be the same. And same with the converse and the inverse. If the converse is true, we know the inverse will be true. If the converse is false, the inverse will be false. Now, sometimes all of them will be true and all of them will be false, but sometimes it won't be that way. But these are the ones that'll go together, which is kind of a cool thing.